Hello there. So for this next assignment, for this section, we've jumped way forward in time, all the way from ancient Greece to late 20th century Chile. And there are two reading assignments for this. The one is a single chapter from Jared Diamond's new book, Upheaval, and the other is this novel. This novel, The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. So these two pair together because Diamond's chapter is about Chile in the time leading up to the military coup and takeover by General Augusto Pinochet, and The House of the Spirits is a fictional account of Chile quite some time before that event and then in the aftermath of that event. So what are the things to think about when we read through this? Well, there are, I suppose, three main ways to think about this. Okay, the first is what insight does Jared Diamond's book give to us? So, as I mentioned on the syllabus, he's a polymath, which means he speaks multiple languages. He's an expert in a whole variety of different fields. He's written a number of very well-received books. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's also a professor at University of California. And he lived in Chile just leading up to the time of this revolution. And he gives us some insight into the political troubles that came just before this happened, how there was this kind of breakdown, this political deadlock, where neither the left nor the right could really get anything done. And then there was this powerful left-wing movement where Allende, who happens to be related to the person who wrote this book, took over power for some time, and he brought some very left-leaning socialist principles into place, and then he was kicked out of power by this military coup, and Augusto Pinochet then came into power, and he ruled for 17 years as a dictator, as what we would call in our context a tyrant. So there had been a form of democracy, and it was replaced by tyranny. So that's one, to think about that, to read the details about what was going on there during that time. The second thing related to that is at the very end of this book, at the very end of this course, Jared Diamond will come back again and we'll read a chapter where he talks about modern-day United States and the extreme political polarization that exists here today, and he draws some direct parallels between what existed in Chile just before this happened and what exists today in the modern-day United States. He also makes it very clear that people in Chile, on the eve of this military dictatorship, would laugh in your face if you said, "Oh, Chile will succumb to tyranny." They would say, "No, Chile is different. We're a democracy. We can rule ourselves. Something like that will never happen." Even when the military dictatorship had come into place, a lot of people said, "Oh no, it'll just be around for a year, and then they'll hand it back. They'll hand power back," right? But that didn't happen. It took 17 years for it to return to democracy again. So that's the second thing to think about. Think about some of the interesting parallels that he starts to set up there. And then thirdly, when you read this, is to think about, we've been looking at a variety of different literary forms. So we started with Plato. We looked at philosophical dialogues, and we looked at how that is useful in putting forward complex definitions. Then we looked at Aeschylus and the Orestean trilogy, so we looked at drama. So what is it that drama can do when trying to deal with these ideas of democracy and tyranny, and in that case, justice and honor, violence, and the restoration of order. And now we're looking at a novel, and this novel is in the genre that is sometimes called magical realism. And magical realism was a movement that came out of Latin America. It began, some people say it began with Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novel called 100 Years of Solitude. In actual fact, there had been styles kind of very similar to this that preceded that novel, like George Louis Borges, for instance. But anyway, what you need to know is that this style, it kind of fuses so-called realism with magic in a way that is kind of subtle, and it doesn't really announce itself as being a change when the magic enters into the ordinary world, right? So like there are, for instance, ghosts that just appear, and that's kind of normal. And when people die, they're still around after they die, and they sort of move around the house and then they disappear. And so it's the interaction between what I suppose many people would think of as being like realist material existence and a kind of more magical worldview. It's very entertaining. It's very cool to read. I enjoy it. But also, at the same time, this book, The House of the Spirits, is a deeply political book. So it not only looks at this coup that took place in Chile, but it looks at the deep economic and social conditions that helped lead to what was originally this like left-wing revolution, and then the right-wing put down of that revolution. So the main character, Esteban Trueba, is, you will see, not deeply sympathetic. At least it's kind of difficult to love him. He's not like a happy-go-lucky, kind, friendly sort of dude. He's a very tough, quite brutal at times character. He's also a very powerful person, and he's able to sort of take land that has fallen barren and build it up again and give people jobs working on the farm. So he has this idea that because he is strong and powerful, he should sit naturally at the top of the political order. And then, of course, this idea is challenged by some of the other characters in the story, particularly daughter, granddaughter, his wife for some time. So there's this like conflict between different types of personalities that is at once a political clash as well. So in this literature, we see how like the politics of the time deeply influences individual personal lives as well. So when you read this, think about, why is a novel particularly good at exploring these ideas? Like, what can a fictional story teach us about a time and a place that a straightforward academic or non-fiction account could not tell us? So this is quite a long read, but I assure you it is very entertaining. This was a very popular book in its time, and it remains one of the kind of seminal works of Latin American fiction in the English-speaking world, at least. So I look forward to hearing all your ideas on this. Enjoy the read, and I'll see you soon.